Public consultation for the budget review, and I think that my role really is just to open the meeting and welcome everybody into the gallery to this public consultation. I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Finance to lead us through this process, and Dale, how you would like to see this process unfold, whether you want questions as we go along or questions at the end. I'll just leave that to you.
You'll see a slide where I've got my
All right, and I think the mayor is here, so here we go. Good. All right.
Well, that's like 22 seconds late. That's just.
I knew you started.
You did.
You did.
Boy, oh
I opened the
boy.
meeting.
You did.
Trying to get my, time in there.
Well, that's good. Acting mayor for 22 seconds. That's
right.
That's shorter than last time.
That's right.
So what did I miss here?
So I just had basically welcomed everybody and had indicated that turning it over to the Director of Finance for the presentation, and Dale can indicate when he would like to have questions and whatnot.
Sounds good. Prepare to get dazzled here.
All right. So we're gathered here tonight. So we're dealing with the 2016-2020 financial plan. The emphasis tonight is going to be on 2016.
There are people behind me. There you go.
So the focus will be on 2016 as we go through the presentation tonight. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, just a little brief introduction about the community charter requirements for municipalities. I'll discuss the property tax assessment information. Then I'll get into some property tax rates and revenue information and some comparisons. And then talk about the district proposed financial plan. Some of the budget highlights for 2016. Then I'll talk about expenditures, revenues, and then the summary. And then at the end we'll have the questions. So the charter requires municipalities to have a financial plan. It has to be adopted annually by bylaw, and it has to be adopted before the property tax bylaw is adopted. The planning periods for the current year and then the following 4 years, and that's a minimum requirement of the charter. You could go to a 10-year plan if you wanted, but that's the minimum requirements of the community charter. And the plan has to disclose the proposed expenditures for the year, and they can't exceed the proposed funding sources. So in other words, you have to have a balanced budget. Getting into the assessment information, the residential assessments for this year has gone up just under 8% in comparison to last year. Utilities is up 5.5%. Supportive housing is just a token amount. Light industry, the percentage looks whopping there, but it is almost $1 million increase on that one. Business is up 10.7% over last year. The recreation, barely no change there. And the farm, just a slight 1% increase. So overall, the total assessment from last year has gone up 8.1%. Looking at average assessments, and I'm using single-family residence to show what that is. And for 2016, the average assessment for a single-family dwelling is just under $228,000, and that's just up over $16,000 over last year. So looking at a comparison of the last 5 years of the average assessment for a single-family dwelling, you can see the differences in each year. So it has, you can see the jump of the 16,000 there from last year. For property tax, I'll talk about the tax increase for 2016. I'll do some 5-year property tax rate comparisons. Some average property tax scenarios. How our property tax revenue is distributed amongst the various classes. What we're collecting for the other governments and the agencies that we're required to do. So the tax increase for 2016 amounts to just over 2%, 2.02%. So what that means is that we're generating 2% more tax revenue from last year. As you'll see in a few slides from now, that doesn't mean that's a 2% tax rate increase, as you'll see what happens to the tax rates when we put in the current year's assessment information. So the 5-year tax rates for the residential class, you can see how it's changed. It did not change in 2014. It was kept the same. Last year it was at 6.925, and the rate for this year dropped down to 6.48. So there was a tax rate decrease for the residential class. And I'll go through these for each of the for the classes. Business class. And you'll see also for this year the business class has dropped down one full point. And the recreational. Recreational rate, tax rates also dropped this year. So all the rates that have dropped, so basically when you throw in that 8% increase in assessments, that still allows the district to generate that 2% extra tax revenue over last year. And then lastly, the farm class. Excuse me. So looking at average taxes for this year, using that 227,400 figure, and with the rates that I just showed you, this is, and just for your information, the school tax rate we don't have yet, so the comparison is using the same rate as last year. School tax is always slow. We probably won't see it for another 2 weeks. All these other rates are going to be actual rates per the requisitions of the regional district, and the BC assessment rates are given to us. We calculate So these two rates, we calculate ourselves, but it's based on what the regional district gives us in a dollar value, saying you guys got to collect this amount. So we plug in the assessment information, and these rates we generate ourselves. That rate there is given to us by BC Assessment. Same with the Finance Authority. So the total average, based on that average assessment, the taxes for that assessed property would be $24.70 and change. So when we do a comparison of the taxes from last year, based on the average of this year, this is what we get. And again, the school tax the school tax rate could go down, so this could change this, this particular scenario. Could go up too, I have no idea. They usually don't shift too much from year to year. So it's gone up, as you'll see on the next slide, around $65 over last year. So that's the total that, using that average, and so just under $65, and that's based on an average assessment. So if somebody's property didn't really change too much, they're probably going to see a decrease in their tax bill. Or if there's not much, if there's only a few grand change in their assessment, then their taxes will probably go down from last year. So this is comparing just the total municipal and the total other government that we collect on their behalf. And that's how that component's made up. So the percentages are pretty consistent as to what part is municipal and what part's for the other governments. So it's gone down slightly, down a percentage point from last year. So looking at it on a visually like this, you can see how the last 5 years, based on the average assessment of that year with the tax rates, you can see so they're fairly consistent in the last 4 years anyways. And now this is just the municipal portion. See how it compares over the last 5 years. And again, the last 4 years are fairly consistent, with the exception of 2012 there. So this is how we're allocating the tax revenue amongst the various tax classes, and what percentage is generated compared to the prior year. So there's a comparison in the assessments, and then that's the various percentage breakdowns of how we're achieving that total tax revenue of $7.384 million. What we're collecting for the other governments, a slight increase from the regional district. Basically no real change on the hospital side of things. BC assessment, a slight increase. Finance authority looks like it's a big percentage, but it only went up $17. Again, the school, keep in mind that we don't have the rate for this year, so that it's not going to be a true figure. Provincial school is for all classes with the exception of residential, which is considered local school. So that's what we're collecting for the government and the agencies, so it's gone up 6%. Again, keeping in mind we don't know what the school is, because that could have a big effect on that. So some of the highlights in this year's budget, and this is all capital items, planning on doing the paving and drainage of Rupert Street for a $250,000. Paving 7th Avenue, Cockle Lake Road to Old Princeton Way, $205,000. Othello Road ditch and road repairs, $600,000. Johnson Road riprap and shoulder in $100,000. Finishing off the Flood Hope Bridge, the paving has yet to be done, so that's carried over into this year. Station house capital upgrades, $900,000. 200,000 was carried forward from last year. The 700,000 is covered by offset on the revenue side with 60% of that being grant funds. So if the grant funding application doesn't get successful, that project wouldn't go through at that amount. So, and the DSAC renovations are in there just under 288,000. And Coquihalla force main on the sewer side of things for 130,000. And there's an upgrade scheduled for well number 1 for 40,000. So those are the key big capital items in this year's financial plan. So we've got a 5-year financial plan. It's for those years, and it's balanced in each year, as this guy can attest to. So the operating expenditures, I'll go through, then the revenues, capital expenditures, I've touched on the bigger items there, and then I'll talk about the financial plan summary. So operating expenditures are broken down by these categories. And protective services, just 87% of that is for RCMP, so it's a big chunk. The last one there is a non-cash item, but we're required to show it under operating expenditures. So our total operating expenditures is just under 11.5 million. So to see this visually, general government, community services, protective services again. 87% of that, 24% is RCMP, public works, transportation, flood protection, community development, water and sewer systems, environmental and public health, recreation, debt financing, and then amortization. So that's how it's broken down by category. On the revenue side, this slide is all the property tax revenue on each of the classes, and that's that 7384 number that you saw before. So carrying that over onto this slide, then we've got the other categories of revenues. Sale of goods and services, that's all the user fees for water and sewer and waste management. And the transfers, that would be the small community protection grant, the gas tax, there. So our total revenues are around 11.9.
You're behind now.
So to see this graphically, you see the property taxes make a big chunk of our revenue sources. Parcel taxes, collections for other governments, utility taxes, penalties, goods and services, investment income, and government transfers. So you can see how the property taxes dominate that slide. So the financial plan summary, basically, you've got your revenues and your operating expenditures, and that you arrive at your surplus or deficit on the operations side. And then to balance the budget, then you bring in the capital, the debt, and the reserve transfers. And our capital expenditures are about $3.5 million. Our debt repayments, this is putting money into reserves. We're using a lot of the prior year's surplus to balance this budget, of which 400 of that is in the police side of things. And that equity, tangible capital assets, that's just it's an accounting entry to offset the amortization, so it's a non-cash amount. And then the reserves that were used for financing capital projects. A big chunk of that is the gas tax and some on the sewer side. And that brings us down to a balanced budget, and that's how basically the financial plan is displayed over the 5 years. So the bottom side, capital debt or reserve would be shown like that, and of course the revenue and the operating expenditures would be broken down by those categories that I showed on the previous slides, and that basically would be what forms part of the bylaw, the Schedule 8 in the financial plan bylaw. So now we're at question period.
Sounds good. Questions from council members start, and then we have the public here.
That's where you're going, so.
I do have a
Councilor
question.
Crawford.
So in our, it wouldn't be in our revenue, but what is our capital reserves looking like?
They're in pretty good shape, but they can always get better.
So do you have a number?
Not off the top of my head. There's 665,000 in the stat reserves and 3.2 million in the non-stat, of which 1.3 million is gas tax reserve.
Your worship, they're in your finance as well.
Yeah, I don't have my binder in front of me.
But those aren't updated, but since I've finished the year-end work, I can provide council with more updated numbers.
A quick question, Bill. The contributions from the utilities, has that been maxed out on the mill rate? Can we get any more from the utilities, or we're
40, the rate of 40.
Oh, yes, that's maxed
So
out. That's as much as we can
That's
get.
a
We actually, by maxing out, we probably generated, what, another 75,000 or something like that?
That's good.
Yeah.
Because they're one group that, as a rule, doesn't plan, so
Yeah.
that's a,
No.
save the taxpayers.
Yeah, my question, just on your comparisons from the last 5 years and the average value home with the taxes paid, is that, if you're looking back to like 2012 or 13, the tax amount that you have there, is that based on the average value of the home for that year?
For that year.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you saw the slide where, like, last year, it was $16,000 lower, that assessment amount was used with that year's tax rate.
Right.
So it's always comparing
Comparing
the same thing.
Thank you.
Apples to apples. Additional questions? Councilor Beck?
Thank you for you. So I'm just curious, this isn't increasing any, having a 2% increase on our part at all? This doesn't include that, or it does?
It does.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay. We have quite a few interested members in the public here, so I guess we'll open it up to anyone in attendance. With the heading of
Are
fire.
you referring me to the interesting one, or I'm not interested?
Well, that remains to be seen, I guess.
Look at this one. So the question is, so what's the tax percentage, what is the tax rate increase then for the residentials if we comparing the 15 and the 16? Because I don't
Well-
see a slide putting them side by side.
Yeah, well, each of the classes, the tax rates dropped.
Yeah.
So I didn't do a comparison of, if we go back to,
Yeah, because if there's a comp slide, then it make it a little bit more easy to understand.
That's good. That's for residential.
yeah, here's, for example, this is, these are the residential rates, for example, over the last 5 years, so I like if you took 6.925 less 6.483, took that amount, divided it by the 6.9, then that's what your percentage decrease would be.
Okay, so we drop a both.
So all the rates have dropped,
Yeah, that's good.
right?
Yeah.
And like I said, the district's still generating 2% more tax revenue.
Mhm.
So everybody's, they're gonna just be affected differently depending on how their assessment
Mhm.
changed over last year.
Yeah, so, so eventually, one of the slide mentioning the policing, we were being taxed $400,000 extra from the previous year.
No, what I did in this one was that we, the RCMP tax that was levied last year,
Yeah,
the police fund came in at $400,000 surplus.
okay,
So what I put in the plan was I'm gonna use that surplus to offset an increase in the RCMP tax.
okay,
So that's saving you, that 400,000 is using from, in essence, we overtaxed last year based on our projections for the expenditures.
mhm,
So I put in $400,000 less on the revenue side and used the surplus to balance the police. So you're getting a break on the RCMP side of things.
okay.
Because,
So if I see an increase probably, when we go back to the normal then, when we offset that surplus, so are we going to see an increase probably next year? Or because eventually this year we have extra $400,000?
well, we'll have to see how this year goes with
Yeah.
what we set for the RCMP rate or revenue based on what we're given to collect for them, or to pay the, the cost of the RCMP services.
But can we agree that potentially we will have, that $400,000 come back? Because we use up the surplus, right? We use the surplus to offset BC expenses.
Yeah,
So that means next year that $400,000 will come back eventually, right?
well, if our tax,
Because that RCMP rate is pretty stable, isn't it? It won't fluctuate like our tax rate between 2011 to 13, right?
We have to do capital.
yeah, I guess how can I explain this?
Yeah.
If the RCMP costs, let's say I collected $2 million in RCMP,
Mhm,
and their costs were 1.6 million.
mhm.
I used 400,000 to bring the expense side, or the revenue side, so I would have only taxed 1.6 million, plus the 400,000 if the RCMP costs were 2 million.
Mhm,
So if those costs do come in at 2 million,
mhm,
I've only generated 1.6 in RCMP revenue,
mhm.
then I'm gonna use that surplus to balance the fund.
Yeah,
So going forward next year, depending if there's still more RCMP surplus, I don't know what's in there, but it would have wiped out the 400,000 that was gained for the prior year. So my plan going forward is if in any year where we're generating more RCMP revenue than what we spend, then on the following year, I'm gonna use the surplus so that you're taxed less on the RCMP.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, since 2013, the last contract, prices, or the cost for RCMP went up substantially. But what happens is they present us, as part of the contract, an annual forecast that we used as a budgetary number. And since 2013, it's been about 2.4 million. So it's the largest single budgetary slice in the district. So just as Dale has described, if that amount isn't reached, we're not double taxing. We're carrying forward the surplus to ensure that the taxpayers get value for policing.
Councillor Erickson,
Yeah, for you, I've been looking, just for example, Public Works Administration to the Public Works area. There is so much materials, freight, supplies, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Is that just a slush fund, or is there actual document saying that we actually used $5,000 up on this one, or $6,000, or $12,000? If you go through there, just every little thing has, on one page, we got materials, freight and supplies, materials, freight and supplies. I think 3 places on one page for the Public Works Fund. I'm just wondering, how does that work? Where they come up with these numbers?
Well, again, being in the first year working with this budget, my preference would be to kind of rename those accounts so that it's more detailed. But each one, even though there's say 3 on that one page when you're looking on the detail of it, it's to a different aspect of the Public Works Department. And that's just from over the years, that's how they set up the accounts. So those numbers, I've gone from the prior year's actual and then consulted with the foreman and all that and put it up as a reasonable number for this year. So in the pre-budget meetings, we basically were going on what was spent last year unless there is something specific that they want to put in this year that's different from last year.
Yeah, so, well, I'm just, you know, if we're trying to squeeze the budget and trying to make every dollar count here, I just can't understand, for example, on page 21, just for example, page 20, public work vehicle maintenance, material supplies freight, public vehicle maintenance, material supplies freight, there's $50,000 right there. Fuel consumption, $34,000. Small tool, material supplies freight, $3,000. Small equipment, material supplies freight, $1,000. Winter attachment, parts supplies freight, $10,000. So it's really difficult to see, is that all spent? Or is that where we got the $1 million surplus from last year that we could transfer in this year? Is this over budget? Or I'm just wondering because, you know, I added the fuel costs up a few weeks ago, and it was like $160,000 for fuel, and we got a $100,000 credit back because we only spent about 60%.
Well,
I think in fairness, a lot of this discussion was clearly answered during the budget meetings, which unfortunately, because we were out of town, missed. So I think we did as a council and as a, you know, members of the public had opportunity to listen as well. So I think a lot of this has been knocked off already. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'm not
No,
trying to.
I didn't get this note.
No, this is-
I was just going through the last.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe the opportunity, if we could, 1 second. I think what might be pertinent, if you have any questions, you know, you certainly sit down with Dale and play catch up a little bit there with the previous budget meetings on that.
Because the last draft, we shaved a lot off the fuel, for example.
Yeah, I think there might be a
Oh, I
few
see
folks
that.
pushing actually.
Some of those fuel numbers, in our opinion,
Yeah.
were way too high. And we went through and reduced them, so. So we'll monitor them this year and then hopefully have a better idea for next year.
It is fair to say, Your Worship, that due to the absence of key personnel last year, some of the projects were delayed. And So there was some surplus due to the fact that we didn't have, for example, a director of operations for quite a while, overlooking some projects. So some projects were delayed, weather delayed, for example, the bridge, etc. So there is some fair comment, but we did spend a lot of time scrubbing the budget, and we can emphatically say that there is no slush fund in the budget.
And that's the other reason too for when I put in 600,000 general fund from surplus. Which was just told on Saturday, is that some things weren't done, so you were taxed, assuming you were gonna get them done. So why tax again when you didn't spend what you were supposed to spend? So that's why the 600,000 was to cushion the general fund, so that for the same principle what I just spoke about with the RCMP. In essence, you set your tax rates last year based on the assumptions that what you're going to spend, and you didn't spend it for whatever reason. So that's the reason for bringing in the surplus.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, Councillor Medlock and then Mr. Young.
Yeah, my question was, I guess for clarification for myself about the RCMP. This is the first year I remember that since I've been on council where we've actually acknowledged that there was a surplus in that particular budget and carried it forward within the same budget. Typically, I think if we look at every year-end report that we've had for the last decade, it was either spent or if there was a surplus, it just went back into general surplus. There was never a particular reserve that we, right? So I think that's the difference that we're doing this year, is that we just earmarked those funds, and that helps offset potential increase to the taxpayer.
As you saw, like I set up the four basic funds, right? The general, and sewer, the water, and the police, in my opinion, should stand alone because it's identifiable that you're taxing to pay for those RCMP costs. You're not taxing RCMP to go pay for freight, materials, and supplies.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's sort of what happened in the past, is those funds.
So now they're separated, so you can keep track of what I just spoke about from next year. I'll have a look at it and go, well, we still have 200,000 that we could use in surplus to cushion next year. I mean, you have to wait and see how the year pans out.
Mr. Young?
So I like the decrease on the tax rate. It's more like a comment than a question anyway. But the part that I still not too impressed or comfortable is eventually we are paying one of the highest tax rate in the face value, and our property tax versus our property value seems to be with one of the highest ratio. And echo to what Councillor Ellison said, I think every dollar actually counts. So eventually for my average household size, for example, I'm paying probably an extra $100 versus last year, and assessment went up, which is good. But at the same time, I just don't get it. We have so many surplus. Eventually, figure out from the previous budget and we put in this budget. But we're still seeing an increase. I think that just doesn't work out too well on my end. I mean, I understand we try to maintain the budget in a reasonable way that we can spend the money, but from a taxpayer point of view, I think we are still paying more.
I'm just going to actually pass forward a couple comments to Mr. Young on that. Number one, I think the tax increases the tax increase that's being proposed is actually arguably much less than would be prudent. We have a deficit of infrastructure projects that have to be dealt with, paving projects that have to be dealt with, so on and so forth. But I think council and staff is very keen on making sure that, you know, the fiscal restraints of everyone, limited budget everyone has is adhered to. So I think what we're doing here is a fine balance between moving ahead in cautious steps and being affordable. We certainly have the option of reducing taxes, but that just means the capital projects that were identified that Mr. Dickens is going to be overseeing over the next year here will be knocked off. And I personally didn't run as mayor to see this community go backwards. I think we have to move this community forwards. Unfortunately, that's a pricey venture, And I think one of the most important things is that we just spend the money that we bring in wisely. The majority of people are as concerned about that as they are about the overall tax. So just make sure the money that comes in is spent in a wise fashion.
But I just want, we should all keep in mind that we are paying the price of a Porsche or a Honda Civic. So we are paying premium tax dollars.
Well, I mean,
So, I mean, that's why it's a comment. It's not more of a question. It's just a feedback from the taxpayer because we are paying very, very, like, I mean, if you look at the property value versus the property tax, it is quite extreme. Let's put it that way. So I just, that's why I'm just voicing out my comments and also as taxpaying whole, because I pay both business and residentials, and eventually, in this world, I mean, that business tax is actually kind of delaying my retirement plan too. The more you tax on my business tax, then the later I can retire.
I don't think you'll have too many worries, if you know what I mean. I think
Yeah.
you're pretty good for yourself. Mr. Weems?
Just to comment on your question, I think we're just unbelievably fortunate to live where we live, and for that we must pay. I have no qualms about paying more tax. I too invest in this town, and I do make money off my investments, and therefore I pay for it. It's not put me in the sewer. I appreciate everything that the town council has done, and if the taxes have to go up, they have to go up. I have no problem with that. My question is, with the public works budget, is there, and I haven't seen it, is there money allotted for the maintenance of the bike park?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a specific line item. I believe.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to let it turn derelict, so it's a good point. Okay, Ms. Hines, and Councilor Dale?
This is my first actual budget thing that I'm attending, so when you talked about the station house,
Mhm.
and you said that based on the grant, if we get the grant, that the government would cover, the grant would cover this much, and if not, then the town or the district is going to cover that.
Well,
Did I misunderstand you?
in order to apply for a grant, your chances of getting accepted are a lot better if it's in your financial plan.
Okay, but
So we put the additional $700,000 in the financial plan for this year. And the way this particular grant works is it's 60-40.
mhm.
So 60% of the 700,000, which I believe is 420,000, we've got in there is that transfer from other governments. That was the grant money. And then the balance of the station house is covered by general revenue and reserves.
Okay.
Now, if we're unsuccessful,
Right,
we're obviously not going ahead with a $700,000 project because we've just lost out $420,000 of revenue. So the project would get scaled back and probably phased until such time maybe there's another grant intake on
you've
something.
answered my question, because that's a big chunk of money.
Yeah.
If we don't get the grant for the district to come up with, and the taxpayer to come up with.
Yeah, no, it's strictly grant dependent.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my
Thank
question.
you. Okay, Councilor Dale?
Yeah, thank you, through you. I don't intend to be confrontational. However, my comment is that I believe that I am living in a Porsche community and not a Honda Civic community. So therefore, I am comfortable with the fact that we collectively decided that we would actually do the 2% increase to property taxes. We wouldn't necessarily have had to have done a 2% increase, but we have such a large realm of infrastructure projects that need to be dealt with, that we feel that, given the fact that the way that the BC assessment had come in, you were already not having an increase. So we felt that in fairness to advance those infrastructures, doing that 2% increase would then put us in a position of putting more money away for infrastructure projects, paving streets, roads, sewers, replacing the RCMP detachment, which is our responsibility. So I take offense by thinking that we live in a Honda Civic community. We don't. We live in a Porsche community, and it costs money sometimes to live in paradise. So, and that's my opinion about where we live in this community, and as council, we've been charged with being visionary in the 4 years in the term that we've been in. And when I leave this term in 4 years, I hope this community is in a better place.
So I'm not trying to be confrontational too, but eventually you ask people who live on the street when the average house assessment is $220,000, I don't think they are living in a posh community. I think we are very blue collar in this community. People have to work, people have to, everybody need jobs, and everybody need to work in a business or be an employee. They all need a job to survive. So I think if you comparing yourself, you're living in a posh community and you're having that lifestyle, I feel happy for you and you're very fortunate. But eventually, I don't feel every day when I look at my bank account as a business owner and I'm doing payroll tonight and I know how much I'm paying for my employees, I truly understand that we are actually living in a Honda Civic community.
And you are able to have your opinion there, Mr.
Oh, of
Young.
course, yeah, but I'm not that rich to claim myself. I live in a posh community.
I think one of the,
I'll trade you right now.
yeah.
No, it's okay, yeah, I feel fortunate.
Okay, just one thing, I think that, number one, I think there's maybe two things that should be addressed here. Mr. Young, I appreciate your comments, but I think as far as just knocking what we're doing, I guess that's fine to vent, but I think what is important is constructive solutions as to how to do the same job for less. And that is something I would look forward to, like to actually send us a note or talk to us at a meeting and say, this is where you can save money right here. This is, but just to say, well, you're spending too much.
I think the Chamber of Commerce, even myself, has made enough comment about such as the station house. When we first voicing it out in a council meeting, we say it's going to be a big urban project and it will cost us a fortune. Eventually, I appreciate that we have public meeting and let the chamber speak up about it, but at the same time, council still approve it and go ahead. At the end, we end up.
Well, you know, I personally ran to move this community forward, not to go backwards. That's why I'm sitting here.
Moving forward does
Now,
I
I think the important point we have to remember as well, when you take a look at the station house project, we're getting an amazing deal. And I'll tell you, we're getting an amazing deal for two reasons. When we utilize the new facility, the refurbished railway station building, we're able to liquidate or reuse for another purpose the existing tourist info facility. So we're able to backfill the money that was spent. We also, and I have to give credit to Mr. Fortolowski for this, he was very innovative as far as a solution to acquire the property. So we have an amazing deal that's been set up there. So this is an absolute, we're getting a Porsche product for Value Village prices. So I'm very happy with the way this project is going, and we have a huge amount of community support for it. There are certain negative Nellies who, regardless of what you do, they're upset about it. But, you know, that's unfortunate. Politics isn't about pleasing everyone, it's about trying to do what's best for the community. So the other thing, and I think this is an important point to mention, council is very keen on planning for the future, obviously, and there's no big mystery that we have an aging infrastructure. So to that end, as many of you here tonight know that have attended council meetings, we've commissioned a couple of consultants here to undertake an asset management study, and that is essentially taking an inventory of the sort of community assets that we have, you know, roads, sewer, water, all those good things, their life cycle, the required repairs to keep them up at a workable level, and there's going to be considerable discussion on that, led by Mr. Fortolowski and Mr. Dickin and Mr. Portis. Next week, there'll be a committee of the whole meeting at 6:30 on Monday. There'll also be additional discussion at the council. I think after you listen to that, you'll probably be advocating for an additional tax increase, because these are, you know, yeah, I'm being silly, but when you see the gravity of the work that is required to keep the infrastructure in our community, you know, current, you know, it's manageable, but it's expensive. And then the other factor that comes into play, of course, although amalgamation was good for community building and generating a sense of oneness, it was a very poor fiscal plan because there's a huge infrastructure burden that the District of Hope now faces that it didn't face as a town of Hope. So obviously we take those challenges on, gladly, but they don't come without expense. So maybe on Monday, if you get a chance, definitely attend the meeting, and it'd be very useful.
Probably just one last reply. I mean, the reason why I brought up the station house is not because I don't support the station house. I think we should do something about it. But just want to clarify that. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is when we're managing our financials aspect, if we can afford it, then go ahead. But if certain things out of the price tag and we couldn't afford it, then maybe we should consider some creative solutions on how to.
Well, we can afford it and we're doing it, so that's, Ms. Hines?
There are, as far as I know, there's some federal grants for infrastructure, but I seem to recall that the federal government is willing to smaller areas like ourselves. Have any of those grants been explored?
Actually, two important ones. The first one is the new federal infrastructure program, which is
Right.
actually a pretty impressive program. And that is, our target for that one is the PCC, the Pollution Control Center, aka affectionately known as the sewage plant. And that is obviously something that is not particularly flashy or impressive to all of us as members of the public, but most people recognize that we need toilets that flush, and we need a sewage treatment plant that, provides conforming affluent levels so that we don't get fined by environment. So that is the target for that one. We've also, I think as Mr. Cordes pointed out, we've applied for the rural dividend grant to help offset the cost of the refurbishment of the Rainbow Junction facility, the station house project. So that would be a very good use of the cash, obviously, that would to help reduce the cost to the taxpayers. And Mr. Thronis, our MLA, is very keen on helping us with that. He's already identified that. I know there's going to be a bit of a feeding frenzy because other groups are trying to apply. So that obviously that may compete with our project a little bit. I don't know what their chances are and so on, but it is an independent evaluation process. The district can't make decisions as to who gets it. Okay, Mr. Cordes?
Just following up on comments made by yourself and Councillor Daible, that basically that 2% extra revenue we're generating, we're putting $250,000 into the infrastructure reserve. And now, having just said that, all the grants that are out there, you're not going to find 100% grants. There's always a municipal component.
Right.
The trend right now is a third with the feds and the province, and then the municipality has to kick in the other third.
Right.
So, whenever these grants pop up and you've got a good plan in place, you got to go, oh, how are we going to fund our third? Because it's all part of the application process. If you can't show that you can fund your own, you're not going to get accepted for it. So, putting $250,000 in a reserve every year, because you can use reserves for your portion.
Right.
So it's a prudent thing to do, to have some insurance with your reserves as an option to fund your 1/3. So, just on $1 million project, you gotta come up with $333,000. Well, if we were gonna apply for one next year, well, we've got $250,000 that we just put away in the bank for that. So you always have to be cognizant of what the grant programs are asking for. Now, we do get gas tax, that's free money that we put towards infrastructure projects. And right now, the district's got like 1.2 million that can still be spent on eligible capital projects. So, in my opinion, keeping your reserves healthy for the future is the way to go.
That makes a lot of sense, because as I said, I'm not, this is my first budget meeting that I'm sitting in on. I did have a question on the budget. It said transportation. What does that mean? What does
That would be
entail?
roads and streets, sidewalks, that type of thing.
So just the two grants, one for the rainbow whatever, and then the pollution whatever, those are the only two grants that have been applied for? I don't know if there's any others available.
There's a couple smaller ones, but they're not included.
Yeah, we just attended actually something this morning that UBCM put on, which is the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. And the gas tax is an annual thing that we get 2 payments every year, so it's a given. They have other programs within the kind of the big project or program that, I mean, it's all federal money, right? So
Right.
it filters down. UBCM manages the provinces rather than the provincial government monitoring it. And every now and again, they have new programs, and we're constantly looking for them, whether it's via their website or their newsletters or whatever. So some of the grants aren't necessarily every year, so we have to be diligent in keeping our eyes open for them and planning ahead for it, so that we do have our third portion of the financing. So yeah, we're always looking for.
Advantage Hope is applying for grants all the time.
So municipalities can't survive without the federal funding. It's just impossible to keep your infrastructure. It's tough enough as it is right now with the infrastructure deficit. If we didn't have all these grant opportunities, I think you'd be going out with a lot of things, or else your taxes would be going through the roof.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, the federal government has made it very clear that there's some new programs out there, so we're lining up the same as the rest of the communities. We don't want to miss out on these opportunities. So, Mr. Stokes.
Mr. Stokes.
Mr. Stokes, I could say Donald, but I think Mr. Stokes.
I found it very encouraging as part of the public works project with seeing Rupert Street listed. By chance, with it being listed, does that mean that the entire street as far down as the boat ramp would be done? You know, with any, if any work? Is
But
it just-
250,000 is a start of a project. Mr. Dickin can elaborate on that, but 250,000 will not solve the Rupert Street problem in its entirety. That's a substantially more expensive problem than 250,000. Mr. Dickin?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. The section of Rupert Street now, I haven't been here that long, so I'm not sure the cross streets that it's between, but there's an area on Rupert where there's a significant drainage problem. Do you know the area I'm speaking of? Where there's considerable ponding.
I would have a pretty good guess.
Yeah. So that's the area that we're focusing on for Rupert because of the drainage issue. It's a constant issue there. I'm told in the wintertime it's quite hazardous with the water and the ice buildup. So that component of the project would be obviously repaving, but at the same time installing storm drainage that does not exist in that area. There is farther west on Rupert storm drainage that ends short of that section. And the idea, the intent behind the project would be to extend that storm drainage up into that problem area and rebuild the road as such so that the road is crowned properly and that the water sheds off the road into the storm system and is carried away.
And actually, you know, tying into that, maybe we could just go to the capital projects slide, please, Mr. Dickin. And maybe, Mr. Dickin, if we can get you to just briefly speak to each one of the capital projects, because they were outlined briefly, but I think there's a number of folks here that haven't been at previous budget meetings, so they might want a little more information on why these are important and exciting projects.
So 7th Avenue was selected because it's a fairly major street in town that obviously serves the hospital and several other facilities. It's also a road that, in keeping with the asset management plan and principles, We certainly would not want to pave a road where infrastructure was coming to the end of its useful life underneath that road. 7th Avenue, for the most part, does not have infrastructure under the road. So ahead of really exploring our new asset management plan, 7th Avenue is a really good choice to repave at this point in time, because the actual pavement surface, it has degraded to a point where it's required. And we also know that we're not paving a road over infrastructure that's close to the end of its useful life. Othello Road, for most of you that may have driven it, you know that it is in rough shape for the most part, for the entire length. There are several areas where we're seeing some longitudinal cracking in the pavement, and we are seeing that cracking increase over time. So this is, essentially it will eventually become an issue of safety. It really is already, but what we want to do is do some proactive maintenance there and stabilize that road in those locations so that we don't see a failure. Johnson Road riprap in the East Kalkaua Lake area. This project involves, there's a creek that runs along the north side of Johnson Road, and during heavy flows, because of the channel, there's quite a bit of debris in the channel, as well as improper riprap along the roadside shouldering. It's actually eroding the shoulder, and in some cases it's actually undermined the very edge of the pavement. So if we don't take action now on that particular project, we are actually going to see parts of the road being eroded, and the pavement on that road is actually in very good condition. And therefore we want to take the proactive measure of re-shouldering and removing the debris out of that channel to prevent any future subsequent issues. And the Flood Hope Bridge paving, this is part of a contract that began last year. There's some paving to do on the west side of the bridge in the Silver Skagit intersection and Yale Road intersection there. It's basically repaving the intersection, and we've also included what would be the pedestrian and or bike lanes coming off of the bridge. So there's some significant potholing, and truck traffic coming off of Silver Skagit has eroded the corner. So that project there will fix up the west side of the bridge, and that's slated to occur in about 6 weeks' time. And then Station House, there's significant upgrades that have occurred to that project to this point with the existing budget that was allocated to it. It was decided that with the Station House being sort of in the midst of a construction phase, that it makes more sense now through leveraging the grant that we spoke of earlier, should we be fortunate enough to receive that grant, to do the project now rather than phase it out, because in the long run, as you know, with construction, everything needs to be done sequentially, and what we don't want to have happen is we finish off, let's say, the main floor and have the tourist info center in the building, and then decide that we're going to do further upgrades down the road when then we have to go back through, and we may have to tear out some of the work that was previously done at this time. So the idea and the thought behind it, and council's direction, was to seek a grant to complete the entire project now, if possible, to save future expenditures that may not be necessary. And the Dan Sherr's Aquatic Center renovations involve some equipment upgrades. There's a water feature in the pool, to my understanding, that is currently not operable and may need replacement or repair. And the big ticket item on that project is sandblasting of the pool. It's got anywhere between 8 and 10 layers of paint on it now, and as those layers have piled up, the paint is no longer adhering, and it's actually flaking off. So over $100,000 of that particular project is sandblasting the pool. Coquihalla, it's not actually Coquihalla Street Force Main, it's a Coquihalla Force Main. So the main lift station in town on Water Avenue that pumps sewage to the pollution control center. And so a force main just means that it's an actual pressurized pipe and it's not gravity flow. We had a rupture on that pipe by the highway exit, I believe it was last year. And during the repair of that rupture, it was noted that the existing pipe is getting very thin and is basically at the end of its useful life. So this is about a 400-meter section of that force main that will be relined with a polymer coating, and to ensure that basically that the existing pipe will act as a form and a new pipe will be established with a specific compound that's actually blown into the pipe. And well number 1 upgrade, this is the well that's at the main fire station downtown. It's got a well pump from 1952 that has done quite well considering the age. And so it's due up for replacement, and that's what this project involves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dugan, and Mr. Councilor Erickson.
Mayor, this goes to Mr. Dickens. Are we going to be selling any equipment this year? Is that on the plans? I didn't see anything come in the budget. Are we just waiting for that? Because last year we had money in the budget, we were going to sell equipment. This year nothing I didn't see.
Madam Chair, yes, Councilor Erickson, we do have quite a few items that we will be disposing of, surplus equipment that is no longer used by Public Works. It's not part of this financial plan, but I will be going out to dispose of that equipment this year, and essentially any monies from that, I would suggest we would set aside into a vehicle replacement reserve.
Yeah. If I could just add to that, I don't like to put in disposal of assets in the budget because it's, on the revenue side, I like to be conservative. And, balance your budget with, oh, we're gonna sell this. You don't know if you're gonna sell it for that price that you think you're gonna sell it for. And it just may not ever make it as a sale. So I look at that as gravy type stuff. That, and the only way, this is my own personal opinion, the only way I would put it in the plan is, say we sold it in February, and it's a given, then I'll throw it in. But to play the guessing game of what you might sell it for, not a good way to budget, in my opinion.
Okay. Additional comments? Ryan?
With the ever-increasing budget for the Station House project, has there ever been any research on what a total replacement of a whole new building would cost?
We did not look at putting a new building there. The whole project was based on the refurbishment of the existing building.
But now with all the increases in the budgeting, it's getting up near what maybe a new building would have cost.
Can't please the heritage, so. I think there, it is a bit of a, although it technically does not qualify for heritage status because it was moved, it does have a historical value as far as, it is an older building in our community, I think one of the oldest. So, the focus was that we would fix up that building and make it a real nice, beautiful centerpiece for the community. So that's been our focus. Ms. Hines?
Has an architectural plan been done yet of the station house?
We just commissioned that because obviously we want to make sure exactly what the cost will be, and without a professional rendering of what a final product will look like, it's just shooting in the dark. So the numbers that we specified here through Mr. Cordes are very high, very intentionally, because if you apply for a grant, you can't up the grant amount,
right,
after the fact, but you can use less, and then your portion obviously will be less as well. So that was the rationale behind that. Obviously, we don't intend to spend more than we have to, but there's no point in underselling ourselves when applying for a grant.
So when you apply for that grant, do you have to present them with the plans?
Yeah, that's a prerequisite for the so they know that we've done our due diligence and homework and established what it would cost roughly, so.
And will those plans be made public?
Oh, yeah, yeah, there's no secrets here.
Well, it's not a matter of
No.
secret, it's a matter of, there's been so much activity up there, and I think a lot of taxpayers like myself would like to see what's it gonna look like, what's being done to it,
Yeah.
what are the specs.
We've had many discussions and many meetings, so if you're a regular attendee, you'll be right on top of it at all times.
If I could ride my bike up here, because I can't, because of the potholes, I would attend.
You phone me up, I'll even pick you up before a council meeting. That's,
Okay.
Okay.
If I could just, on that last comment, the reason that you want to, I don't want to use the word inflate, but
Cushion it.
cushion it, because I've had the experience in the past where you put the cost together, and an example, with the engineer put the cost together, we sent that in on the application, but it took them a year, 9 months before they decided who was successful and who wasn't. Well, in that 9-month period, the cost went up, and so the municipality's portion went up, and then they had to scramble to find out how to pay their 1/3. So, as the mayor alluded to, if this comes in under, well, then our grant's less, but then our portion's less, so.
Well, it's not dissimilar to buying a
So
house
you
and
wanna-
renovating a house, you wanna have that cushion.
You don't wanna make your application for a number that's not realistic,
Right.
and in the same case, you wanna have the room in your financial plan so that when you do submit your application, you've got it covered.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. And, Mr. Crowe?
Yeah, just quickly, I do have to leave in 4 minutes, not that I'm counting, but I just wanted to say something else too, is that thank you to staff. It was a long drawn out process, but Dale, in the short period of time that you've been here, you've really proven that you've listened to council, and I have my hats off to you on that one. It's a big one, and I really appreciate the emails and the answers, and when we're discussing things, you make notes and you make sure it comes forward at the next time. It's very important to me as a council member in this community that I'm listened to, and I do feel that way with you, and I thank you and the rest of the staff for that. My next comment is that even if we have a $4.5 million surplus, not surplus but reserve, we have to remember that some of that stuff is earmarked for things like water reserve, for example. We are not allowed to touch that. It's designated by law where it goes. Some of those funds that we had to raise, and it did hit the pocketbook, and as Mr. Young stated, it is difficult sometimes, and he's saying that, and I hear that, and I agree, especially for seniors, it is very difficult, or single-family people that are hardworking and they're making minimum wage. It's very difficult, and I think over the years, councils have struggled with the balance of the fact that there isn't really always enough young working people that are making that big dollar to offset some of those costs, and we don't have enough industrial in our community to offset those costs like Chilliwack has and Abbotsford has and all those bigger places. So thank you for sticking with us while we're struggling, because if you look at even if you look at $5 million in reserves, if we had 5 projects and they were over $1 million each, we'd be wiped out. We'd have nothing left in our coffers. So we have to be careful. And also the fact is too is that a lot of these projects are for shelf-ready communities. And I'll refer back to our park, when we had all those blowdowns in the park. Remember all those trees that fell down and everything like that. And because our community came forward and we had all those charrettes and we had all those different things that we had public input into, the community decided that they liked this, that, and the next thing. And when the event happened and we actually had put money into the public hearing so that we could have this shelf-ready plan, because we knew that there was going to be some things coming down the road, some grants we'd heard about, and so we got ahead of that one time, and suddenly it costs us $30,000 or $40,000 or $60,000 just to get that grant application in, because we have to have that plan in place. So the consultation fees are pretty expensive. So if you take a a grant that's worth $900,000 and you start piecemealing it because it's $75,000 just for the grant application, because you have to have that shelf-ready thing, then you have to have a contingency in there because you don't really know if it's gonna be sitting there for a year. And then you actually have to have the money in there. You can't suddenly go to the taxpayer and say, hey guys, we're gonna do this. We really have to have our bridge replaced because, you know, it's falling and the next school bus might go over the side. So you have to have those things in place. It doesn't, $5 million seems like a lot of money. It probably is. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm pretty sure it is. But I also know that those costs, they're there. And they're potentially, for hope, a big one. So we have a small community, one that I love dearly. And yeah, and it is a struggle to make all those things happen. But you know, I just want to say thanks for hanging in there with us. It's a hard decision, but I hear ya. That's it.
I think you're officially late based on that presentation.
Yeah. It's your fault, Stephen.
That was more than 4 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
Councilor Crowe.
thank you. I'll take my apple juice with me and away I go. Sorry, people, I've got another project. If there was 2 of me, it'd be okay. And I'd be thinner. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Mr. Dillon.
Yeah, yeah, take care.
Your worship, if I may, with the assistance of Google Earth, it's no longer here. Anyways, the section of Rupert Street that will be addressed this year is between Yale and Willow,
Okay.
for those who are wondering.
Yeah, sounds good. Additional comments?
I just have a quick question on the station house again.
Okay.
I'm relatively new to the community, and when I came here last year, it was when the whole thing was getting started. How can a project be initiated and you're just doing architectural plans now and just figuring out what the actual cost is going to be when it was initiated last year? I'm just trying to understand how.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, you know, if you would be a regular attendee at council meetings, you would have got the play-by-play on it. What we did initially, and because we have an amazing group of volunteers, we were able to get the building structurally sound, utilizing a local contractor and some extensive volunteer labor. We had now the opportunity and yeah, to get it to an engineered standard, so it's safe to do additional work on, because it was a little haphazard at the time. It was an old building that hadn't been, you know, properly refurbished. This grant opportunity came up, and as a council and as a staff, we decided that it was definitely worth looking at. The initial plan was to do it on a phased basis and do it over 3 or 4 years, depending how the momentum would go. There is an opportunity to do it in one shot now, build on the work that's already been done, but essentially tender the job and get a contractor in and get it done with volunteer workers as well, because we're blessed to have a lot of people that are willing to volunteer on the project, so that's a huge sort of financial secret weapon, as it were. Now, because the grant application process is very stringent, they want essentially the exact drawings of what the final product will be like. So to qualify for the grant, you need those exact drawings, otherwise you're not even in the running. So that is essentially the rationale for it.
Okay, I'm just wondering why you even enter into the project if you don't know what the final result is going to be.
Yeah.
When you entered into it.
Yeah, we did have sketches and mock-ups, but not for the sort of the expanded version of what we're looking at. Councilor Medlow?
Yeah, my take on it is, when the project first came to council, are we gonna go for it or not? The appetite for spending money on it wasn't there at the time. So the approach we took was to get it to a structural, sound, safe, where it is now, basically, so that we could have the National and the Info Center Museum moved there, and then phase out the project in future years. That focus has since changed very recently to look at completing it all now with the application of this grant. So there was never an appetite to spend $900,000 on it 2 years ago. There was barely an appetite for $200,000, but we went forward with that plan. Things have changed based on new information. So that's where we're at now. I think that hopefully that answers your question a bit better. And, you know, it costs money to get those reports too. So I don't think anybody was willing to spend $25,000 on architectural designs back then, when there was never a desire to spend any more than $200,000 on the structural that was estimated at the time, right? Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think that ties into what it says. Okay. I think we're getting close to the wrap-up stage here, unless there's additional comments. And I think one of the interesting things too, and I'll keep this reasonably short-winded, but one of the interesting challenges that council always has is to pick away at all the to-dos in an appropriate manner. Like a lot of people, unless a lot of folks that approach us, unless that pothole that's in their street is paved, they don't want anything else in the community done. To heck with the sewage treatment plant, to heck with the station house, to heck with bridge upgrades. So that the interesting challenge that council is always faced with is we have to pick away at the projects around the community as best we can with the limited resources we have. And that's, I know working with council and with our admin and staff here, I think we have a very good team to pick away at these projects appropriately, and I'm very satisfied that we've had some very good discussion on the things that have to be done and how to spend money most wisely. And I would say, given my career choice as mayor, I'm definitely in the low income category, so I totally get the point about saving money on taxes and keeping increases to the lowest possible. But quite frankly, I have to be a man of my word too. When I ran, I said 2% per year for 4 years. That's what I stand for. And I spent $320 getting elected, so I'm kind of thinking that wasn't I'm kind of thinking that wasn't, I'm kind of thinking that 2% thing didn't scare people away. So I mean, I think the point that I forwarded there was palatable to most people. So I think that is, I have to stay true to that as an individual. Obviously, I'm 1 out of 7 votes at the table, so not particularly impressive, but definitely 1 out of 7. And I think moving ahead with a tax regime like this, I think most people will be reasonably satisfied that we're moving in the right direction and trying to be as affordable as possible. So, thank you to staff for all the good work. Yeah.
Just on the next steps here.
Yeah.
Just some Just a question, I guess, just for information, the next steps in the process here. This was the public consultation night, which was required.
So Monday night's council meeting, the financial plan bylaw will be there for 3 readings, followed by the tax rate bylaw for 3 readings, and then May 9th will be adopted, and all the necessary documents will be sent to Victoria, et cetera, et cetera. And then just off topic, but still financially related, May 9th is probably the meeting, but will be the meeting for the financial statements that will bring forward. The auditing will just currently wrapping that up, so.
For year end?
Yeah, so Monday meeting was too soon for them, so, because they have to be adopted by May 15th as well, by council, so.
I just have one question. Is it possible to start next year's financial in September for 2017?
I don't know if it's September, but it'll be sooner.
So we could get this.
The ball will get rolling a lot sooner.
We're almost halfway
I mean,
through the
I'll
year.
put it on a full cycle, so I'll be more familiar with that, and probably in consultation with Kevin and other foremen and that, on to do a kind of review of the chart of accounts and get some of the accounts a little bit more meaningful in their description. And some of them also maybe a little bit more detailed. So that's going forward with the budget process, but I would think that, we probably have at least 1 or 2 meetings in the late fall.
Is anyone drastically opposed to adjournment to that concept? Okay, that's just a talking track. Okay, have a good night, everyone.